Welcome, traveler. Let the edges of your day begin to soften. The sharp lines of thought, the weight of memory, allow them all to dissolve into the quiet comfort of this moment. You are drifting now in that gentle liminal space between waking and dreaming, a place where the rules of reality grow soft, and the veil between worlds becomes thin as mist. Feel a gentle pull, a faint shimmer in the air around you, as if you are being summoned not by a sound, but by an appointment you did not know you had. The familiar comfort of your room fades, replaced by a cool, profound darkness, a peaceful void. You are not alarmed. You are simply waiting. Suddenly, the stillness is broken, not by a frightening crash, but by a blur of motion and a flash of gold. A figure appears before you with the speed of a falling star, coming to a sudden, slightly flustered halt. He is dressed in the garb of an ancient messenger, and on his feet are a pair of small, intricately winged sandals that still seem to be humming with the energy of 1,000 cosmic errands. He doesn't notice you at first. He is too busy consulting a glowing scroll that floats in the air before him, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Right then, let's see," he mutters to himself, his voice quick and businesslike. "Collection for Gerald of Athens Potter. Cause of departure. Unfortunate encounter with a rather ambitious goat. Right. Standard soul non-heroic class. Should be straightforward." He finally looks up from his list, his eyes bright and impossibly ancient, searching the darkness for his client. They land on you. He freezes. He squints. He looks back down at his glowing scroll, then back up at you, a look of sublime, divine annoyance crossing his features. "Hold on a moment," he says, his professional tone cracking slightly. "You don't look like a Gerald, and you most certainly do not have the lingering aroma of goat-induced tragedy about you. You're breathing, aren't you?" He snaps his fingers, and a small spark of light zings through the air. You flinch slightly. "Ah," he says, letting out a long, weary sigh. It is the sigh of a being who has dealt with this exact kind of cosmic paperwork error one too many times. Wrong soul. Of course. I told Zeus the fates need to improve their handwriting. This is what happens when you try to rush a collection schedule. He runs a hand through his hair momentarily, at a loss. The trouble is, the paperwork to send a living soul back from the threshold is a nightmare. It requires forms in triplicate, a formal appeal to the Underworld Zoning Commission, and a very awkward conversation with a very grumpy ferryman. It takes eons. He pauses, tapping a finger on his chin, an idea beginning to form in his clever eyes. He looks at you with a sudden conspiratorial grin. "All right, new plan," he says, his voice shifting into that of a charming, if slightly harassed, tour guide. "Since you're already here, and I've technically met my quota for this celestial hour, how about a quick tour instead? Consider it a complimentary behind-the-scenes glimpse into the premium afterlife experience. No extra charge." He winks. "We'll call it a spontaneous spiritual excursion." It sounds much better on the report than "collected the wrong entity again." So what do you say? A short guided journey into the land of shadows, and I'll have you back in your bed before you even know you're gone. Just relax. Try to look spectral. And let me do all the talking. The staff here can be a bit particular. This is Sleep Among Titans, and you, dear listener, are exactly where you're meant to be. If your eyes are still open, welcome. If they're starting to close, that's perfect too. The story will wait. It always has. And if this night brings you calm, I'd love to know. Leave a whisper in the comments. Or simply subscribe, leave a lantern lit so the next dream can find you. The scene solidifies around you. The formless, peaceful void gives way to the misty banks of a great silent river. Hermes stands beside you, looking thoroughly unimpressed by the grandeur of the Underworld's entrance. He adjusts the strap of his messenger bag and turns to you with the air of a tour guide about to start a very long day. Right then, he says, his voice a brisk and cheerful whisper that seems utterly out of place in this solemn landscape. "Welcome to the first stop on our unplanned tour of the great beyond." Before we get to the main attraction, the river cruise itself, which has a certain monotonous charm, we must first observe the Pre-boarding preparations. It's dreadfully dull, mostly waiting and weeping, but it's an absolutely mandatory part of the process for all our clients. He raises a hand, and the mist before you swirls and parts, forming a window into another place. The gray, ethereal gloom is replaced by the dim, flickering light of an oil lamp inside a simple Athenian home. The air that reaches you through this strange portal is thick with the scent of crushed herbs, rosemary and myrrh used to mask a different, more somber smell, and the low rhythmic sound of women's quiet weeping. "We're looking in on the house of Lycomedes Hermes," explains, his tone shifting to that of a commentator at a sporting event. Lycomedes was a respectable stonemason, a bit too fond of uncut wine, but a good man. He's our subject for this portion of the tour. He checked out of the mortal coil about an hour ago, a classic case of arguing with a stubborn mule. The mule, as is often the case, won. You see the body of the old man Lycomedes laid out on a high couch. He has been washed, anointed with oil, and dressed in a simple but clean white shroud. His female relatives move around him, their movements graceful and practiced. One places a crown woven from wild celery upon his head. That part there is the prothesis, Hermes murmurs, pointing with his chin. The laying out of the body. You could call it the spa treatment portion of the service package, a final grooming before the long journey ahead. The celery crown is a nice touch, a little something to snack on during the trip, perhaps, though I've never seen anyone actually eat it. Your gaze is drawn to a specific intimate action. The wife of the deceased, her face a mask of dignified sorrow, takes a small bronze coin from a purse. With the utmost care, she opens her husband's mouth and places the coin under his tongue. "Ah," Hermes says, leaning in with genuine interest. "Pay close attention. This is the single most important logistical step of the entire process. The obol. The coin for the ferryman." He winks at you. Think of it as a non-negotiable prepaid one-way fare. No coin, no ride. It's a very strict policy. I don't make the rules, you understand. I just have to deal with the logistical fallout when mortals forget. Karen's pricing is fixed, and he does not under any circumstances offer credit. I've seen souls try everything. "I'll pay you on the other side." "Can I start a tab? Do you take personal checks?" The answer is always a stony, terrifying silence. It makes for very awkward situations at the dock. "So this little coin," he says, as the wife gently closes her husband's mouth, "is the most valuable thing he owns right now." For a day and a night you watch as friends and neighbors come to pay their respects. They touch the feet of the deceased, they offer condolences, and the women continue their ritual lament, a beautiful, sorrowful song that weaves together memories of the man's life. A lot of weeping, a few hymns. It's all very dramatic, but a traditional part of the farewell ceremony, Hermes notes with a professional air. It lets the living process their grief, and it gives the soul a proper send-off. It also gives me a bit of time to catch up on my paperwork, so I don't mind. The scene outside the window then shifts. The sun has not yet risen, and the streets of Athens are cloaked in the deep, quiet blue of the pre-dawn hour. The body of Lycomedes is carried out of the house on a simple wooden bier. A procession begins to form, and now the ekphora Hermes whispers. The funeral procession. They always do this before sunrise. It's considered bad form to parade your grief through the morning market while people are trying to buy fish. It tends to dampen the mood. The Athenians are very considerate in that regard. You watch the small group move through the silent streets. A musician at the front plays a low, mournful tune on an aulos, a double reed flute, its sound a lonely thread in the vast quiet. The flickering torchlight casts long dancing shadows on the walls of the sleeping city. The mourners walk slowly, their soft footsteps the only other sound. It's quite a lot of effort, isn't it? Hermes muses, his voice taking on a rare, reflective tone. All this for one soul. All this ceremony. All this grief. All this care. But they do it because they understand in their bones that this is their final duty. Their last act of love is to ensure the journey of the deceased begins on the right foot, with the fare for the ferryman securely paid. The procession finally reaches the city gates and moves toward the cemetery beyond. They perform the final rites, leaving offerings of wine and milk, their last goodbyes whispered into the cool morning air. Hermes lets the vision fade, and you are once again standing in the gray mist at the edge of the underworld. "All right," he says, his brisk tone returning. "The pre-boarding preparations are complete. The client is officially on his way. That was the easy part. Now let's go ahead to the main terminal to see what happens when they actually arrive. I should warn you," he adds, a mischievous glint in his eye, "the lead boatman is notoriously grumpy." The vision of the Athenian funeral procession fades like smoke, and you are once again standing in the gray, timeless mist at the edge of the underworld. Hermes lets out a small, satisfied sigh, as if closing a file on a successfully completed case. "And there you have it," he says, his brisk professional tone returning. "A successful client departure. The rites were performed, the goodbyes were said, and most importantly, the fare was paid. When everything goes according to plan, my job is remarkably straightforward. A simple pickup and delivery." He gestures for you to follow him, and you begin to walk not toward the river, but along its misty, featureless bank. The ground here is not soil. It is a soft gray ash that makes no sound beneath your feet. The air is cold and still carrying only the faint metallic scent of stagnant water and old, deep sadness. "But," he continues, his voice dropping as if he's about to share a trade secret, "that was a textbook case. The best case scenario, as we say in the business. Now you've seen a successful departure. But what happens when there's a complication, a missing payment, an incomplete burial, an oversight in the mortal paperwork?" He stops and gestures with a sweep of his hand towards the scene before you. "That," he says with the weary resignation of a manager facing a quarterly review he knows will be terrible, "is when we enter the truly tedious part of my job. Welcome to the customer service purgatory." You look where he is pointing, and your breath catches in your throat. Before you, stretching along the banks of the great dark river, Styx as far as the eye can see, is a crowd. A vast, silent, shimmering multitude of souls. There are thousands of them, perhaps tens of thousands, all gathered at the water's edge. They are not wailing or screaming. The grief here is too old, too tired for such theatrics. Instead, they are utterly silent, and the only sound they make is a soft collective rustle, like a forest of dry leaves in a wind you cannot feel. Their forms are indistinct, translucent. They are like smoke or like memories struggling to hold their shape. They drift aimlessly, their feet seeming not to touch the ashen ground. Some stare intently at the dark, oily water of the river, their expressions a mixture of longing and despair. Others simply wander back and forth, their movements without purpose, their eyes holding a profound and unending confusion. "And here we have them," Hermes says with a profound sigh. "The wait list, the unticketed passengers, the souls in transit limbo, the eternal bane of my existence." He points to a group of souls huddled together, their forms seeming more ragged than the others. "These over here, the ones who look like they've just run a marathon through a battlefield, they probably have. Those are the adaphoi, the unburied, soldiers left where they fell, their bodies unmourned, sailors whose bones now rest at the bottom of the sea. Their mortal affairs were never concluded. Their departure paperwork, if you will, was never stamped and finalized. So they are stuck. They cannot truly leave the world of the living, but they cannot enter the world of the dead, a classic interdepartmental issue." He then directs your attention to another larger group. These souls seem less confused and more frustrated. They clutch at their own ethereal robes, their misty forms radiating a sense of deep injustice. "And this charming bunch," he says, "they are the ones who truly break my heart. They were buried. Their families wept. The rites were performed. But in their grief, their living relatives made one small catastrophic clerical error. They forgot the obol." He shakes his head in disbelief. "They have a reservation, you see, but no proof of payment. So they wait. They watch Charon's ferry come and go again and again, and he won't even look in their direction. His no coin, no ride policy is famously inflexible." As if to prove his point, you see the dark, rickety shape of Charon's ferry glide past on the river. A few of the coinless souls drift to the water's edge, their misty hands reaching out, their silent pleas radiating across the water. Charon does not turn his head. He pulls his boat forward, his ancient, gnarled form a study in absolute indifference. The official policy handed down by the fates themselves. Hermes continues ticking points off on his fingers. Is a 100-year waiting period before their case is even eligible for review. A century. Can you imagine the backlog? The administrative overhead is staggering. And who do you think they complain to? He doesn't have to answer. At that moment, a few of the shades notice him the only being of light and substance in this gray landscape. They begin to drift towards you, their movements slow and pleading. They do not speak, but you can feel their collective sorrow, their silent questions washing over you like a cold tide. Why? How long can you help us? Hermes holds up his hands in a gesture of weary, practiced helplessness. No, please, he says, addressing the silent, gathering crowd. I understand your frustration. I truly do. However, I am merely the transit authority. I escort paying customers from point A to point B. I do not handle ticketing payment disputes or appeals. All complaints regarding denied passage must be filed with, well, no one actually. That is the fundamental problem with the system. He turns to you, shielding his mouth with his hand as if sharing a secret. They do this every time, he whispers. They think because I have wings on my shoes I can offer them an upgrade or sneak them onto the boat. I can't even get myself a decent cup of nectar on Olympus most days without filling out a requisition form. I have no power here. I'm just the delivery boy. His light, humorous tone falters for a moment as he looks out over the vast waiting crowd. A genuine sadness touches his features. He sees the souls of infants who died before their time hovering near the shore, their forms small and confused. He sees the young men and women cut down in their prime, their eyes still holding the ghost of a life unlived. He quickly shakes it off, his professional demeanor returning like a mask. It is, however, he says, his voice once again becoming that of a tour guide, a very effective cautionary tale. Their waiting here serves a purpose. It is a profound and eternal reminder to the living of their most sacred duty. The greatest gift you can give to someone you have lost is not a grand tomb or a flowery eulogy. It is a proper farewell, a journey that is complete, a passage that is paid. He looks at you, his eyes serious now. It teaches you that the small acts of remembrance of care of duty, they are not small at all. They are everything. They are the coin that allows a soul to finally cross the river and be at peace. A lesson worth remembering, I think. He claps his hands together, once a sound that seems to break the spell of sorrow that hangs over the shore. All right, that's quite enough of the waiting area. It's terribly depressing, and it's bad for my professional reputation to be seen fraternizing with the unticketed. We have a schedule to keep. Let's move on to the main event, shall we? Time to meet our charming boatman. Try to look important. You are standing with Hermes on the ashen, misty shore of the Underworld. The great rustling crowd of unticketed souls has been left behind, their silent despair fading into the gloom. Hermes claps his hands together, once a clean, sharp sound in the oppressive silence, as if to dust off the sorrow. Right then, he says, his voice regaining its brisk professional cheer. Enough of that depressing lot. That was the customer service department, and frankly, it's always a bit of a downer. Let's move on to the main event, shall we? The transport hub, the grand terminal. I must warn you, the decor is rather minimalist. He leads you away from the vast plains of waiting and along a narrow, muddy track that follows the river's edge. The ground here is a thick, cold sludge, a mixture of gray ash and black mud that seems to pull at your feet with every step. The air grows colder, heavier, carrying the scent of wet, rotting wood and a deep, ancient stillness. The only sound is the soft squelch of your own unseen footsteps and the slow, oily lapping of the River Styx against its shore. The profound, expectant silence that hangs over this place is a living entity, a pressure against your eardrums. After a short walk, you see it through the mist. It is not a grand dock nor a bustling port. It is simply a single rotting wooden pier, jutting out into the black water like a crooked finger pointing towards oblivion. At the end of the pier, a boat is moored, and there she is, Hermes says, with a theatrical flourish of his hand. The Stygian splendor. A marvel of nautical engineering, is she not? Hasn't had a new coat of paint since? Well, ever. I believe she's held together more by stubborn memory than by actual nails at this point, but she's reliable. She only makes one stop. The boat is ancient. It is a simple flat-bottomed ferry, its wood splintered and blackened by eons of exposure to the gloom of this place. Moss clings to its sides in damp green patches, and the air around it is thick with the smell of decay. It is a tired, functional vessel, a tool that has performed the same task day in and day out since the beginning of time. It is utterly devoid of comfort, of beauty, of hope. And at its helm stands its captain. At first you see only a silhouette, a gnarled, hunched shape standing at the rear of the boat, one hand resting on a long, dark pole. He seems less like a man and more like a part of the boat itself, a figurehead carved from the same ancient waterlogged wood. As you draw closer, you begin to make out the details, and you feel a primal chill that has nothing to do with the cold air. This is Charon. His beard is a long, tangled mat of gray like river mist and cobwebs given form. His skin is the color of ancient leather stretched taut over a frame of bone and sinew. He wears a simple hooded and exceedingly filthy tunic, its original color lost to the ages. But it is his eyes that hold your attention. They are not malevolent. They are not cruel. They are perhaps more terrifyingly, utterly empty. They are like old worn coins, their surfaces smoothed over by the passage of a million souls, until no trace of judgment or pity or even interest remains. He looks at the world, at the endless line of the dead, and sees nothing but cargo. And there he is. Hermes whispers to you, his voice a low conspiratorial murmur. Our captain, our one and only employee of the month, every month for all of eternity. The face of the company, Charon. He leans a little closer. Don't expect a warm welcome. His people skills are, shall we say, a work in progress. A multi-millennial work in progress. I believe the last time he smiled was when Sisyphus tried to pay with a rock he'd painted gold. He's been polling this same dreary route since before the Titans learned to spell their own names. He hasn't had a vacation. He hasn't had a sick day. You can imagine the state of his mood. You watch the ancient ferryman, who remains as still as a statue, his gaze fixed on the shore. His hobbies. Hermes continues counting on his fingers include staring into the middle distance, grunting softly and taking coins. That's it. That's the entire list. I've tried making small talk over the millennia. You know, how's the current today? Busy shift. Seen any interesting souls lately? Nothing. Not a peep. It's like having a conversation with a very grumpy piece of driftwood. You see now the queue of souls who have managed to get this far. These are the ones with their fare, the ticketed passengers. They are different from the frantic lost souls you saw before. They are silent, orderly, their forms still indistinct, but now imbued with a sense of purpose. They stand in a single neat line, waiting their turn. The process is one of mechanical, unfeeling efficiency. You watch as the first soul in line, the shade of what might have been a great warrior, steps onto the pier. It approaches Charon. It opens its misty mouth, and you see the faint glint of the obol on its tongue. The soul places the small, simple coin into Charon's outstretched, gnarled hand. Charon's hand closes over the coin. He does not look at it. He does not inspect it. He simply feels its weight, its reality. It is the only thing in this entire process that is real to him. The coin is accepted. He gives a single curt nod, gesturing with his head toward the boat. The soul of the warrior drifts aboard and huddles with the others, a gray shape among gray shapes. The next soul steps forward. It is a young woman. The process repeats. The coin, the nod, the boarding, again and again. A baker, a poet, a child, each one the same. It's a perfect system in its own grim way, Hermes observes. No debate, no haggling, no appeals. The transaction is the only language he speaks. The weight of the coin is the only word he understands. It is the most honest business in the cosmos. The line shuffles forward, each soul stepping up to pay the final toll, their ticket for the last journey. They board the ancient ferry, not sitting on benches, for there are none, but crowding together on the damp floorboards, a silent, gray, and patient cargo. Finally, the boat is full. Charon makes no announcement. He simply turns his back to the shore, ready to depart. Excellent timing, Hermes says, grabbing your arm gently. Our turn. Now you don't have a coin, obviously. And we really don't want to go through the ordeal of trying to explain your unique situation to him. This is where being the special guest of the divine messenger God comes in handy. He gives you a reassuring smile. He and I have an arrangement, a professional understanding. He tolerates my presence. Mostly. Just stay close. Try to look as insubstantial as possible, and whatever you do, he adds, his voice dropping to a serious whisper. Do not ask him if he has Wi-Fi. I made that mistake once in the early days of your mortal internet. He didn't speak to me for a century. With that, he leads you onto the pier. As you approach, Karen turns his head slowly, and his empty, ancient eyes fall upon you. For a moment, you feel a cold that sinks deeper than bone, a cold of pure elemental finality. He seems to look right through you to see the living, breathing, warm blood in your veins, so out of place in his monochromatic world. He lets out a low, guttural grunt, a sound of profound disapproval. Hermes simply gives him a charming, confident salute. Sharon stares for another long moment, then turns away with another grunt, this one of resignation. He has decided you are not his problem. You are Hermes's problem. And with that, he gestures with his head toward the boat. You have been permitted to board. You step onto the ancient ferry, your feet finding a small, clear space amongst the silent, huddled shapes of the other souls. The wood beneath you is damp and impossibly old. Hermes steps aboard right after you, landing with a light, soundless grace that is the complete opposite of Karen's heavy, weary presence. The ferryman gives Hermes one final disapproving grunt before turning his back to the shore. He plants the end of his long, dark pole into the ashen mud, and with a slow, powerful push that seems to draw strength from the very core of the earth, the boat glides away from the bank. And we're off. Hermes says, his voice a cheerful whisper that cuts through the solemn silence. He leans towards you conspiratorially. The departure was right on schedule. I do appreciate punctuality. It's a rare virtue in both gods and men. The shore you just left with its restless crowd of waiting souls recedes into the thick gray mist and disappears. You are now adrift on the River Styx. The feeling is one of absolute disconnection. The world of the living is gone, and the world of the dead has not yet been reached. You are in a state of perfect unnerving transit. Now Hermes begins, his tone shifting to that of a cheerful flight attendant giving a safety demonstration, a few words about our journey. Welcome aboard the Styx Express, the only direct service to the Underworld. Please keep your hands, feet, and any other corporeal or ethereal forms you might possess inside the boat at all times. The journey will be smooth, quiet, and consistently gray. And please, he begins, his tone that of a cheerful but concerned flight attendant, refrain from any contact with the river itself. This isn't water as you know it. It isn't wet. It is final. Keep your hands inside the boat. This is the River Styx, the river of unbreakable promises. It is liquid oath. It is a promise made manifest. His voice for a moment loses its light, witty edge and takes on a note of profound, ancient awe. You might be wondering, he says softly, has anyone ever dared to break a promise made on this water? Has the king of the gods himself, my father Zeus, ever tried to defy its power? He lets out a short, dry laugh. No, that is a line that even he will not cross. In all his power, he is terrified of this river. You see, an oath sworn on the Styx is the ultimate cosmic contract. To break it is to invite a punishment so terrible it makes 1,000 years in Tartarus look like a pleasant holiday. He leans in closer, his eyes twinkling with a grim amusement. The god who lies on the Styx will fall into a sleep that is not sleep. For 1 full year they lie breathless and voiceless, a divine statue with a still beating heart, cut off from all ambrosia and nectar. After that rather unpleasant nap, they get 9 more years of exile from Olympus. No parties, no witty dinner conversation, no divine privileges. Just a very long, very lonely time out. The cancellation fees, he adds with a wink, are astronomical. My father has never been foolish enough to break such an oath. Hermes continues, his gaze drifting into a distant memory. But I have seen him trapped by one. I have seen his omnipotence undone by his own words, and the result was tragedy. I was there when he fell for the mortal princess Semele. His love was a wildfire. and in a moment of reckless passion, he swore that terrible binding oath upon this very water to grant her any single thing she desired. My stepmother Hera, in her infinite and predictable jealousy, saw her chance. She whispered poison into Semele's ear, planting a seed of doubt. "If he truly loves you," she hissed, "he will show himself to you not as a mortal lover, but in all his divine glory." A cruel and brilliant trap. Semele, bless her naive heart, made her request, and I watched my father's face as he heard it. I saw the king of the universe, the wielder of the thunderbolt, become a prisoner of his own promise. He had all the negotiating power of a wet mouse. He pleaded, he begged her to choose anything else, but the oath once sworn could not be unmade. Hermes sighs a sound filled with ancient sorrow, so he did as he had promised. He revealed himself, and no mortal can survive such a sight. She was consumed in an instant, burned to ash by the very glory she had longed to see. He was bound by his word, and so he became the instrument of his own heartbreak. He turns back to you, his expression now serious. So you see the importance of the rule. No splashing, and whatever you do, he adds with a final mischievous smile, don't make any promises you can't keep while we're on this water. The universe takes things very literally down here. He leans in again, his mischievous smile returning. So you understand, no splashing. The paperwork I'd have to file for a mortal who has accidentally put themselves into a divine coma is extensive, and I truly do not want to have that conversation with the fates. You glide on in silence, your vessel the only moving thing in this vast, unchanging landscape. The boat does not rock. The water does not splash against its sides. It parts silently like thick black oil. The journey is eerily smooth. After a time, Hermes speaks again, resuming his role as tour guide. And now for the scenic portion of our cruise, he says with a grand gesture, if you look to your left, you will see a great deal of gray mist. And if you now turn and look to your right, yes, a slightly different but equally compelling shade of gray mist. The views are remarkably consistent. It's a minimalist's dream, this place. The humor in his voice is a small warm spark in the immense cold silence. The silence here is unlike anything you have ever experienced. It is not just the absence of sound. It is a presence. It is a heavy blanket that smothers all thought. The only sound is the slow rhythmic dip of Charon's pole into the dark water, a sound like a single lonely heartbeat marking the passage of an eternity. You look at the other passengers on the boat. They are a silent gray cargo, their forms huddled together on the damp floorboards. They do not look at each other. They do not look at you. Their misty eyes are fixed on the unseen shore ahead. Look at them, Hermes says softly, his voice losing its jocularity and becoming reflective once more. In the world above, one was a king who commanded armies. Another was a farmer who commanded nothing but a pair of oxen. That one there was a poet whose words made women weep, and the one beside her was a baker whose only art was the turning of flour into bread. On this boat they are all the same. Their stories, their triumphs, their great sorrows, their small joys. All of it has been washed away into this shared gray anonymity. He watches them for a long moment, a look of profound philosophical sadness in his ancient eyes. This is the great terrible democracy of death. All are equal here. All are silent. All have paid the same single coin for their passage. He turns to you, a flicker of his own unique loneliness showing through his cheerful facade. I am the only one who makes a round trip. Every day I cross this river, I see these faces, I feel this silence. And then I return to the light, to the noise, to the chaos of the living. I am a bridge between two worlds, and a bridge, you see, belongs to neither shore. Sometimes I confess the silence gets to me. It is hard to make conversation when your fellow passengers are memories. The journey continues. It feels as if it could go on forever, this slow, silent glide through a world without time or feature. But then through the mist ahead, you see it. A dark line on the horizon. The other shore. It looks identical to the one you left. The same ashen mud, the same featureless gray stones. A perfect grim symmetry. As the boat bumps gently against the pier, a sound that seems shockingly loud in the silence, the souls begin to stir. Charon plants his pole firmly, holding the boat steady. He does not need to give an order. The souls rise as one and begin to disembark, a silent, shuffling procession, moving toward the great dark gates of the underworld. "Well, all ashore, that's going ashore," Hermes says brightly. End of the line. But before we proceed to the welcome center, a word about our head of security. He gestures toward the gates. And there you see him, a monstrous three-headed hound lying silently, its 6 eyes glowing with a faint internal fire. It is Cerberus, the guardian of the gates. He is larger than you could have possibly imagined, a beast of pure terrifying power. Yet he is not growling or barking. He is simply watching. His 3 heads turn in unison, following the slow progress of the souls. "That's Cerberus," Hermes says in a low, appreciative voice. "Don't be alarmed by the multiple heads. It's mostly for show. Makes him look more intimidating on his official portrait. He's actually a consummate professional, very diligent, excellent at his primary duty, which is, to be absolutely clear, ensuring no one leaves. He's not so concerned about who comes in. As long as you're heading in the right direction, he's perfectly content." He reaches into his messenger bag. He has one weakness, though. He whispers conspiratorially, pulling out a small, perfectly formed honey cake. He has a terrible sweet tooth. I always bring him one. It's a small professional courtesy. It helps to stay on the good side of the security staff, you know. He particularly likes the ones with a hint of cinnamon. As you approach the gates, Cerberus rises, his great form blocking the path. He looks down at you, the living, breathing anomaly in his world of shades. A low, deep rumble begins in his 3 chests. Hermes simply steps forward and holds out the honey cake. "For you, my friend," he says, with a charming smile. Cerberus's 6 eyes fix on the cake. The rumbling stops. His 3 great tongues lick his 3 sets of chops in unison. With a surprising gentleness, he takes the cake and swallows it in a single gulp. He then gives a small, contented sigh, lies back down, and rests his 3 heads on his paws, his duty of inspection complete. "The path is clear," see, Hermes says with a satisfied nod. A little bit of kindness goes a long way, even with the hounds of hell. He turns to you, ready to continue the tour. "Come on. As long as you're with me, you have an all-access VIP pass. He won't bother us. Now that we've cleared security, let's move on." The geography of this place is rather interesting, if a bit repetitive. The great dark gates of the underworld have closed behind you with a sound of deep, echoing finality. Cerberus, satisfied with his honey cake, has settled back into a slumbering heap of fur and teeth. The immediate sense of danger has passed, replaced by a vast, unending stillness. You are now truly inside the kingdom of the dead. Hermes turns to you, his cheerful demeanor a stark, almost comical contrast to the profound gloom surrounding you. "Excellent," he says, rubbing his hands together. "Security cleared. No incidents to report. I call that a successful entry. Now welcome, my dear living tourist, to the main plaza, the great waiting room of eternity. This is the plains of Asphodel." You look around. The landscape that stretches before you is one of sublime, soul-crushing monotony. It is a vast, gray, featureless plain that extends to a misty, unreachable horizon. The ground is not soil, but a fine pale ash, and from it grow millions upon millions of asphodel flowers. They are not the vibrant, living flowers of the world above. They are pale, ghost-like, and translucent, their petals the color of smoke. They give off no scent, and wandering among them aimlessly are the souls. The vast majority of the dead reside here. They are the shades of those who were neither exceptionally good nor exceptionally evil in life. They are the souls of the average, the ordinary, the forgotten. They drift through the pale flowers, their forms shimmering like heat haze, their faces blank, their memories washed clean by the passage into death. They rustle as they pass each other, a sound like a million dry leaves stirring in a wind that does not blow. This is the general admission section. Hermes explains, his voice a low, confidential murmur. Not quite good enough for the VIP lounge, not nearly bad enough for the high security wing. So this is where they end up. An eternity of, well, this. Endless, quiet, uneventful wandering. It's not a punishment, you understand. It is simply an absence of joy, of sorrow, of purpose. It is the great eternal neutrality. He sighs. Frankly, I find it terribly boring. But let us not linger. The main attractions on this part of the tour are of a more liquid nature. This realm, you see, is defined by its rivers. They are the arteries of the afterlife. Shall we? He leads you away from the listless, whispering shades of the asphodel meadows, your footsteps making no sound on the ashen ground. You walk for what feels like a long time, the landscape unchanging, until you begin to feel a change in the air. It grows heavier, more oppressive, and you hear a sound, or rather you feel a sound, a low, deep thrumming, a vibration that seems to come from the very bedrock of this world. You arrive at the banks of another river. This one is different from the Styx. The water is a murky, turgid black, and it flows with a slow, heavy current that seems to suck all light from the air. The atmosphere around it is thick with a palpable sense of misery. And here we have our first scenic waterway. Hermes says, his tour guide voice tinged with a delicate irony. The lovely River Acheron, the river of pain. A popular spot for no one, really. We don't recommend swimming. The currents are emotionally draining. You stare at the dark water and you can almost feel the weight of its sorrow. It does not look like water. It looks like liquid despair. Hermes' tone becomes more reflective as he watches the slow, dark current. Mortals in your world think pain is a sharp, loud thing. A scream, a wound, a sudden loss. And it is. But that is only its beginning. Here, pain is not an event. It is a landscape. It is a slow, deep, silent current that flows on forever. It is the collected weight of every regret, every sorrow, every heartache that the souls carried with them from their lives. It all flows down here and becomes this, a permanent feature of the geography. He gestures downstream where the river disappears into the mist. All souls must cross this river as well. Charon brings them over the Styx, and then they must find their own way across the Acheron. Some build rafts of their own despair. Others simply wade through. It is a necessary cleansing, a final letting go of the pains of the world above. He shudders theatrically. A dreadful place. Let's move on. The next river has much better acoustics. He leads you along the bank, the oppressive weight of the Acheron slowly receding, only to be replaced by a new sensation. It is a sound. A faint, constant, high-pitched keening that seems to come from everywhere at once. It grows louder as you walk a multi-layered symphony of sorrow. You arrive at the source. Another river, this one seeming to weep its surface, agitated by unseen grief, its banks damp with what looks like tears. And that beautiful chorus you hear, Hermes says, cupping a hand to his ear. That is our next stop. Welcome to the River Cocytus, the river of wailing. As you can hear, the acoustics in this valley are fantastic. It's formed from the collective tears of every mourner in the world above. Every widow, every orphan, every grieving mother. Their sorrow flows down here and creates this. A bit dramatic, I know, but it has a certain consistency. Never runs dry, this one. He looks at the weeping river with a kind of professional curiosity. It's a strange thing, isn't it? The living weep to release their sorrow, to let it go. And where does it go? It comes here. It becomes a permanent landmark in the kingdom of the dead. It seems grief is one of the most powerful construction materials in the cosmos. It builds rivers. He seems about to say more, but then shakes his head. A fascinating hydrological phenomenon, but not a pleasant place for a stroll. We have one more river to visit in this district, and it's of a much warmer disposition. He guides you away from the sound of eternal weeping, and as you walk, you begin to feel a change in the air once more. The damp cold is replaced by a dry, intense heat. The gray gloom ahead is replaced by a fierce, flickering red glow. You arrive on the banks of the third river, and this one takes your breath away. It is a river of fire. It is not a raging inferno of smoke and chaos. It is a slow, silent, incandescent river of liquid flame. It flows without sound, its surface a mesmerizing, shifting tapestry of orange, red, and gold. It gives off a powerful dry heat, but you notice the light it casts creates no comforting warmth. It is a light that illuminates but does not nurture. And this, Hermes says, pointing with a flourish of his caduceus staff, is the magnificent River Phlegathon. Think of it as the exclusive high-security gated community of the Underworld. It serves as a very effective, very dramatic moat. You see, it surrounds the land of Tartarus, where we keep our most distinguished residents. He gestures into the fiery gloom on the other side of the river. The Titans are in there. My grandfather Kronos is a long-term resident. A few other notable figures who made the catastrophic mistake of challenging my father's authority. The waitlist to get out of that particular neighborhood is eternal. It's a very secure facility. His witty tone fades as he gazes into the slow-moving river of fire, his expression becoming thoughtful and serious. Mortals think of this as a river of punishment, he says softly. And in a way it is. But its purpose is not simply to cause pain. It is about containment. It is about separation. The fire is not meant to burn the souls within Tartarus. Their forms are beyond such simple harm. It is meant to be a permanent, impassable reminder that they are apart from the rest of the cosmos forever. It is a river of pure, unending consequence, a boundary made of light and heat more final than any wall of stone. He watches the silent, mesmerizing flow for another moment, then turns to you. Well, that's enough of the high-security district. The residents are terribly boring conversationalists, and the dry heat is bad for my complexion. Let's move on to the more pleasant neighborhoods, shall we? There are still a couple of places I think you might find interesting before your complimentary tour concludes. You follow Hermes away from the fiery, incandescent glow of the River Phlegathon. The oppressive dry heat begins to recede, and the menacing red light fades behind you, swallowed once more by the perpetual gray twilight of the Underworld. The air, which had been tense and sharp, now seems to soften, becoming gentle and almost pleasant. Well, Hermes says, fanning himself theatrically with his hand, that's quite enough of the high-security district. The residents there are terribly boring conversationalists, and the dry heat is simply dreadful for the complexion. Let's move on to the more pleasant neighborhoods, shall we? Our tour is not all doom and gloom. There are, believe it or not, desirable post-mortem residential areas. He leads you onto a new path, one that seems less defined by ash and mud. You notice a change in the atmosphere. The ever-present gray gloom begins to lift, replaced by a soft, silvery golden light that seems to emanate from no particular source but from the air itself. A gentle breeze stirs, and for the first time in this realm, it carries a scent, a faint, impossibly sweet fragrance, like night-blooming jasmine and the smell of old beloved books. The oppressive silence is broken by the distant ethereal sound of what might be a lyre, its notes beautiful, but carrying no emotional weight. You have arrived in a different world within a world. Before you stretches a vast, endless meadow of soft, silvery grass that never needs cutting. Groves of graceful white-barked poplar trees sway gently in the breeze, their leaves whispering secrets to one another. And here we are, Hermes announces with the flourish of a proud real estate agent. The Elysian Fields, the VIP lounge, the eternal retirement community for the virtuous, the heroic, and the exceptionally well-behaved. The premier destination for the discerning soul. You look out across the meadow and see the residents of this peaceful paradise. They are not the listless gray shades of the asphodel plains. Their forms are luminous, almost solid, glowing with a soft internal light. They are engaged in endless peaceful pastimes. You see great heroes, their phantom wounds long healed, practicing their swordplay in slow, graceful motions, their movements a perfect ballet of remembered glory. You see poets, their brows furrowed in gentle concentration, reciting verses to one another, their words carried away on the scent of the breeze. You see philosophers gathered under the shade of a poplar tree, engaged in a quiet, eternal debate that will never reach a conclusion, and they seem perfectly happy with that. It's lovely, I suppose. Hermes says, his tone a mixture of admiration and a faint, almost imperceptible boredom. If you enjoy endless, vaguely pleasant afternoons and polite philosophical conversation that never actually ends. Personally, I find it a bit slow. Not enough intrigue for my taste. The gossip here is terribly tame. He points to a particularly luminous figure sitting alone by a shimmering spring-fed pool staring at his own reflection. See that fellow over there? The one with the magnificent armor and the world-class sulk, that's Achilles. Still complaining that being the noblest of the dead isn't nearly as interesting as being the most famously short-tempered of the living. He misses the thrill of battle. Here, the only conflict is deciding which philosophical premise is more elegantly structured. It's not quite the same. You watch the peaceful, static beauty of the scene. The heroes, the poets, the sages, they are all here rewarded with an eternity of perfect peace. Yet as you look closer, you begin to understand what Hermes means. There is a strange sadness to this paradise. It is a life without struggle, he says softly, his voice losing its witty edge and becoming deeply reflective. He has read your thoughts. A story with no ending because it has no conflict. They have achieved perfect peace, perfect contentment. But is a life without striving, without longing, without the bitter taste of loss to make the sweet taste sweeter? Is that truly a life at all? Or is it just a beautiful static painting you can admire forever? He lets the question hang in the perfumed air. They are happy in their way, but their happiness is a placid lake. The happiness of the living, that is a raging river. It is more dangerous, yes, but it is also so much more alive. That is a truth the dead understand better than anyone. He turns from the peaceful fields. A lovely place to visit, but I wouldn't want to... Well, you know. Let's move on. There is one final river to see, and it is perhaps the strangest of them all. This next stop is what you might call the final checkout, before a soul is cleared for redeployment. He leads you away from the soft golden light of Elysium. The landscape becomes misty and indistinct once more, the sounds of ethereal music fading behind you. You arrive at the banks of the fifth and final river of the Underworld. This river is utterly unlike the others. It is not black like the Styx or Acheron, nor fiery like the Phlegethon. Its water is a slow, thick, milky white, and it flows with a profound and absolute silence. It makes no sound as it glides past. The air around it is heavy not with sorrow or with heat, but with a deep, enervating drowsiness. Just standing near it makes your thoughts feel slow, your limbs heavy. And this Hermes says, his voice a low, almost hypnotic whisper, is the River Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. Think of this as the data wipe station before a soul is approved for reincarnation. You see souls kneeling at the river's edge. These are not the listless shades of Asphodel, nor the luminous heroes of Elysium. They are somewhere in between their forms, clear their memories, still intact. One by one, they cup their hands, scoop up the milky, silent water, and drink. You watch fascinated and horrified as a transformation occurs. As a soul drinks from the Lethe, its luminous form seems to dim. The lines of character on its face, the pride of the warrior, the wisdom of the sage soften and dissolve, becoming a blank, placid mask. Their eyes, which may have held millennia of memories, become vacant. They are forgetting everything. Their past lives, their names, their families, their greatest triumphs, their most secret sorrows. It is all washed away by the silent white water. A full memory wipe, Hermes explains with professional detachment. It's very efficient. It saves us the trouble of dealing with millennia of unresolved emotional baggage when they're sent back upstairs for a new life. Can you imagine the chaos if they remembered all their past mistakes, all their old grudges and broken hearts? The mortal world is complicated enough as it is. This gives them a clean slate, a fresh start. He watches a soul, once a great queen, now a blank and nameless shade, rise from the riverbank and drift away, ready to be reborn as a farmer's child or a city merchant with no memory of the crown she once wore. A deep philosophical curiosity fills his voice. They say we are the sum of our memories, our joys, our pains, our loves, our losses. That is what makes us who we are. So what are they now? He asks, gesturing to the empty vessels kneeling by the water. A blank page, an unwritten story. Is that the ultimate gift? Or is it the ultimate loss? To be given a new life, but at the cost of everything that made you you. He looks at you, his ancient eyes holding the weight of that unanswerable question. That, my living friend, is a mystery far deeper than any found at Eleusis, and it is a question that even the gods do not have a simple answer for. He turns from the silent white river. A rather heavy thought to end on, isn't it? But that is the nature of this place. Now, our tour of the districts is over. There's just one final reflection I'd like to share with you before I process your return trip. You are standing with Hermes, having just left the silent, milky white banks of the River Lethe. The profound, unanswerable question of memory and identity hangs in the still gray air. Hermes turns from the river, his expression one of a teacher who has just posed a question he knows has no easy answer. He leads you back towards the vast, featureless plains of Asphodel. A rather heavy thought to end our tour of the districts on, isn't it? He says, his voice a soft, meditative hum. But that is the nature of this place. It strips away all the easy answers, all the comfortable certainties you hold so dear in the world of the living. It forces you to look at the bare, unadorned structure of existence. He stops and gestures around at the silent gray landscape, at the pale, ghost-like flowers, at the listless shades drifting aimlessly in the distance. And what is that structure? He asks, his voice almost a whisper. What is the one great foundational truth upon which this entire kingdom is built? It is the truth you saw at Charon's pier. The king and the beggar both holding the same small coin. The hero and the philosopher both rendered powerless. Here the currencies of your world, strength, wisdom, beauty, wealth, power, they are worthless. They are like foreign money that cannot be exchanged at this final, unyielding border. He looks at you, his ancient eyes holding a deep, unwavering clarity. In your world you strive. You compete. You build walls and hierarchies. You spend your short, frantic lives trying to prove you are better, stronger, more important than the person standing next to you. Here, all of that effort is revealed for what it is, a beautiful, frantic, and ultimately temporary game. Here, there is only one class of citizen, and everyone is a member. And so he continues, his voice becoming even softer, more intimate. The greatest lesson of this place is the lesson of surrender. You cannot fight your way through this kingdom. You cannot outsmart it. You cannot bribe it. The only way to navigate it is to yield. You surrender your identity, your history, your power. You surrender everything that you thought made you you. And in that surrender, there is a strange, and for many, an unwelcome peace. The great, exhausting struggle of life is finally over. The need to be more, to do more, to have more, it all just falls away. You become nothing but a soul in a vast, quiet space. He pauses, a gentle, compassionate smile touching his lips as he looks at you, the living tourist in his land of shades. A rather humbling thought, isn't it? But perhaps a peaceful one, too. The pressures of your world, the frantic need to be someone to achieve something, you can let them go for a moment. They have no power here. In this place, you are allowed to just be. He claps his hands together once the sound sharp and final. His tone shifts, the philosopher suddenly replaced by the stressed, overworked administrator. Now he says with a profound sigh that seems to carry the weight of millennia of paperwork. Our tour of the philosophy and procedures of the underworld is almost complete, which brings us to the final, and by far the most difficult part of the excursion, the checkout process. Specifically, your checkout process. He begins to pace back and forth, running a hand through his hair in genuine agitation. This is the part I was dreading. Returning a paying customer, a deceased soul, is straightforward. But you are a living, breathing, unauthorized anomaly. A logistical nightmare. He starts ticking off points on his fingers, his voice rising with theatrical frustration. First, to do this by the book, I would have to file a wrongful soul collection, Form SR-117. It's a dreadful document, all in ethereal triplicate, and it requires a detailed explanation of the error, which is frankly embarrassing for me professionally. Then that form needs to be submitted along with a temporary mortal incursion waiver, which has to be reviewed by the Fates and countersigned by one of the Furies. And let me tell you, you do not want to bother Tisiphone before she's had her morning cup of Whatever bitter, vengeful liquid it is she drinks, she is not a morning person. He continues his frantic pacing. After that, there's the environmental impact report I'd have to file with Persephone's office for the unauthorized introduction of body heat and positive emotions into a temperate gloom zone. She's very particular about her atmospheric consistency. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, is the debriefing with Hades. He doesn't shout, he just stares. He sits on his great dark throne and stares at me with those silent judgmental eyes while I try to explain how I mistook a living, breathing being for a deceased potter named Gerald. It's terribly unnerving. He throws his hands up in the air in a gesture of complete surrender. Frankly, it's a bureaucratic catastrophe. The paperwork alone would take me a century to clear. My celestial inbox is already overflowing. So, I have a better idea. A much more efficient, off-the-books, and altogether more pleasant solution. His frantic energy dissolves, replaced once more by his charming conspiratorial grin. He steps closer to you and his voice becomes a soothing, hypnotic whisper. Consider this the express checkout, he says gently. No forms, no waiting, no awkward conversations with terrifying deities. Just a little push. A gentle nudge back to where you belong. He raises a hand not to touch you, but as a gesture of guidance. Now I need you to do something for me. Close your eyes. That's it. You don't need them here anymore. The sights of this place are best forgotten for now. Feel that gray, misty world around you begin to dissolve. Let it become soft, unfocused. Let the memory of the silent rivers and the whispering shades fade away. Forget the oppressive majesty of Hades' hall. Forget the mournful beauty of the Elysian fields. Forget Charon's grumpy face and the heavy weight of the obol. For now, just let it all go. His voice is the only thing that exists now, a warm golden thread in the peaceful darkness of your mind. You are light now. Lighter than a soul, lighter than a memory. You are just a thought, a presence drifting away from the cold ash of the underworld. You are drifting back. Back towards warmth, towards life, towards the soft, familiar comfort of your own bed. The journey is over. You feel a final gentle sensation, like a soft breeze at your back, nudging you forward out of this world of shadow and into your own quiet peace. It was an interesting tour, you hear his voice say now, seeming to come from a great distance. You were a remarkably quiet and cooperative guest. And please, if you happen to see my father in your dreams, do tell him I need a raise, or at least clearer dockets. Now, sleep well, living soul. The checkout is complete.